The bite on my neck began to rapidly heal and I could feel the change wanting to happen, but unlike Michael Corvin, I can completely control everything in my body with superpowers, and I can even become a vampire and lichen hybrid now if I wanted to, but I knew that would be suspicious, so I rapidly healed the bite mark on my neck for a reason, and my hormones made me look very attractive even to vampires. And then Celine's eyes turned blue and she asked me, what's that smell? And then she said, that smell is you, and where's your bite mark? And I said, I don't know. I think I just healed very fast. And then Celine said, no, that's not possible, that means you're not an ordinary lichen. And then I asked her, what the hell are you talking about? And then she said, I have a theory. There's a legend that speaks of the progenitor of the vampires and lichens, and his name is Alexander Corvinus, and I think you have his bloodline, and that also explains why you're not dead yet, and his bloodline must be very strong in you. And then Celine said, I have to stop the car because I can't control it anymore. And then Celine parked at a nearby store, and then she said, I'm so sorry James, I can't control it anymore. And then I asked her, you can't control what? And then she moved very fast before I had time to react, and then Celine bit into my neck gently, and then after she fed on my blood for a bit of time, she began to take all my clothes off, and she practically ripped my clothes off, and she took her leather suit off, and she had sex with me in the car, and that changed everything. And while she was having sex with me I was transforming, but she didn't care. And then finally I had a massive orgasm and we both growled and moaned, and I couldn't believe it. I was now fulfilling a great fantasy of mine like I always wanted. I was now having sex with the Kate Beckinsale look-alike of Celine the Death Dealer. Something I always wanted to do was have sex with Celine from the Underworld movies, and now I have. And even in that car I made love to Celine in every sexual position. And then sun had risen high in the sky and it glowed bright against Celine's skin, but it didn't hurt her. Instead, the power in my blood had helped her to conquer even the sun itself. And then Celine woke up and she became frightened as she saw the sun. She said, it's daylight but I'm not burning. And then she shook me awake and she said, James, wake up, something isn't normal. And then I moaned loudly and said, just let me sleep please, I'm tired. And then she got a bit irritated and then she smacked me and she said, wake up please. And then I said, oh my god, what the hell lady? Why did you smack me for? I'm trying to sleep, I've been through a lot lately. And then Celine said, we have slept long enough. And then I said, it's been a busy night. And then Celine smiled like a pervert, and then I asked her, so what is the issue? Why did you hit me? And then she said, well, I'm trying to figure out why I'm not burning up right now. And then I said, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. All this talk about vampires and werewolves is really starting to bother me. I was just an ordinary human not so long ago. And then I said, don't ask me, Celine, because I don't know why the hell you're not burning up. I was just an ordinary human not too long ago, remember? And then she said, okay, damn, someone is cranky. And then I said, I was just sleeping and you smacked the hell out of me. What did you expect? And then she said, okay, I'm sorry. And then I said, I need a lot more sleep. And then Celine said, your blood obviously has incredible powers. And then Celine looked at where she bit me and her bite mark was already healing. And then she said, you have very powerful abilities and it's as if your blood and body are adapting to everything. And then I said, maybe it's my Corvinus bloodline you spoke about earlier, remember? And then she said, yes, that's it, you're right, and I need to take you back to my coven, Celine said, because since your bite marks have healed none of them will know what you are. And then I asked, what exactly am I? And then Celine said, I don't know, but you're not a vampire or a lichen, you are something new. And then I said, I transformed last night. I remember hunting and drinking the blood of animals, and I remember eating the animals like food. It made me feel stronger after I drank their blood and ate the animals. And then Celine said, that was your first hunt as a type of beast, but I don't know what to call you. And then I said, I think I'm a hybrid of vampire and lichen. And then Celine said, you might be right. And then I said, I'm starving, I'm going to get something to eat. And then Celine said, I wouldn't. And then I said, screw it, I'm hungry. And then I went to a restaurant and I ordered breakfast, and I looked at the food before I ate it and I said, oh screw it, I hope this works. And then I said, oh god, that's so good. And then I just ate everything and nothing happened. And I said, okay, I feel great and I feel better. And then Celine said, it's been over 2 hours, no puke.